Hello, my name is Nick McIver and I want to tell you about my research into the relationship between status, tension and effective teaching. To do this, I'm going to place these two concepts within the wider notion of teacher credibility, which begs the question, what is teacher credibility? Probably easiest to understand by saying what it's not. Here is an image of a teacher who has lost her professional credibility, and there is not a lot of learning going on. My question is, can teacher credibility be taught? The idea of teacher credibility has been around since the 1970s, when people still used typewriters to write their academic papers. And it's been quite widely explored since then, with a number of articles in communication and educational psychology journals. Then in 2012, John Hattie cited teacher credibility as one of the biggest factors influencing pupil progress. Now, plenty of academics have criticised the whole notion of interventions and effect sizes. I would argue that it would be foolish to ignore something that is potentially so significant. So let's take a closer look at teacher credibility. There seems to be a fairly broad consensus about the factors that make up teacher credibility, and they're generally placed under 3 or 4 headings. For instance, this paper suggests trustworthiness, competence, dynamism, and immediacy as the dimensions of teacher credibility. And when we look more closely at those headings, we find that the first 2 issues look at things like knowing your subject and planning decent lessons. No surprises there. But the next 2 seem to be all about performing. Dynamism is something to do with projecting authority, and immediacy is all about looking relaxed. They're almost like acting notes. And what's interesting is that these ideas have been around in the theatre for years, but instead of dynamism, we talk about high status behaviours, and instead of immediacy, we talk about low tension. And best of all, we know how to teach them. Now, first of all, status. Keith Johnstone, the granddaddy of status in theatre education. For him, the notion of status was something that was fluid and flexible. It changes during social interactions. Your status goes up if everybody laughs at your joke, and goes down again when everyone realises the joke's on you. Tension is something a bit more subtle. It grew out of the work on masks by Jacques Lecoq, the French theatre practitioner in the 1950s, 60s, who believed that neutral was the most powerful mask for the performer. One of his students, John Wright, took this idea forward and went on to suggest that the most powerful physical state for an actor is one of neutral tension. And he then put together a kind of tension scale, which, unlike the status scale, goes round in a circle. It's not linear because it starts and finishes with immobility. These ideas of status games, mask theatre, and states of tension are very widely taught in drama schools. My hypothesis is that the first and last of these can be taught to teachers to enhance their credibility in the classroom. So how am I investigating this? First thing I had to do was create some kind of observation rubric that would help me focus on the key behaviours that signpost the status and tension of the classroom teacher. And this is what I came up with. I've broken it down into 4 areas: voice, body language, teacher retention, and the normal classroom management stuff with which most of us are familiar. Next thing I had to do was find some teachers who were willing to be observed. And I offered them the opportunity to learn about classroom presence. Notice I'm coining a new term here because teacher credibility covers all these dimensions, whereas I'm interested in the more theatrical ones, so I'm interested in introducing a new term, classroom presence, rather than credibility. I then carried out some observations. I found the rubric I showed you earlier to be rather cumbersome in practice, so I just did a straightforward timeline, but focused on those behaviours that I was investigating, the markers of status and tension. I did find the observation rubric extremely useful as a kind of analytical tool for working through my basic notes. It really helped to clarify particular strengths and weaknesses of individual teachers working with particular groups of people. Once I've done this, I fed back to my guinea pig teachers with a bit of theoretical exposition. I wanted them to know why I believed the stuff I was talking to them about worked, and I found this diagram quite useful. You can see that the highest status, open posture, full vocal register is the neutral state of tension, and down at the bottom, closed posture, limited vocal register is the high tension state. The teachers then hear an analysis of their status and tension changes during the lesson. They respond to that analysis. We agree on things they can try to work forward, to move forward with, and then we repeat the whole thing 3 to 6 weeks later and have another coaching session after that. I'm now about 2/3 of the way through my data gathering phase. 4 teachers have been observed and fed back to twice. The final cycle is a little bit different because there will be a more extended interview afterwards rather than a feedback session from me to them, giving them an opportunity to reflect. What have I learned so far? Well, there seems to be some evidence of the utility of the observation data, which is borne out by comments from individual teachers. And the response of the teachers to the coaching has been positive so far, but some caveats and some remaining questions. I don't know how transferable any of these processes are. I've spent 30 years thinking about status and tension. I don't know how easy it would be to train up someone else from scratch. I also know that because I've been around teaching for a while, people will defer to me. Are they just telling me what I want to hear? That remains to be seen.